I have just attended my first Fashion Week. I live in Brooklyn, so it was New York Fashion Week. And if you know about the fashion calendar, the brands were showing their spring-summer 2026 collections. My online algorithms have definitely been geared towards Fashion Week because I'm interested to see where people are going, what people are doing, what people's thoughts are about the events and runway shows they're experiencing. And I've seen some of the more classic critiques of Fashion Week that you see every year. But I feel like now that I'm on the inside, now that I'm, one of the influencers that people complain about, I find that a lot of the internet's complaints about Fashion Week to be uninteresting. Not even wrong necessarily, but first of all, it does feel like it's the same thing every year. But second of all, the Fashion Week critique that I'm interested in is about the business of fashion. I want to know why a runway show didn't work for you. I want to know why you thought this brand's marketing tactic was wrong. I want to know why you thought that person shouldn't have been in the front row. A lot of the critiques are just about the fact that New York Fashion Week exists as it does. But I think that it exists in the way it does for very good reasons. This is a trade show. It's an industry show. And I think influencers are marketing. They're part of marketing. They're part of the marketing machine. And there's a very good reason why influencers are at Fashion Week. But then you also have complaints that are seemingly at odds with each other. You have one group of people complaining about how Fashion Week is exclusionary and gatekeepy, and another group of people that are saying that it's been overrun with wannabes or people who aren't in the industry or influencers who are not supposed to be there. The influencer thing, again, fashion marketing has changed a lot in the last 10 to 20 years, right? You used to have a handful of publications who were controlling most of the journalism, a lot of the marketing, your Vogue, Marie Claire, Harper's Bazaar. They were monopolizing the conversation around fashion to a certain degree. And with social media, you have this great, I would say, democratization, but also it's become decentralized. So you do have a lot more people who are involved in the fashion conversation. That's just, I don't know what to tell you. That's sign of the times. I mean, people were complaining when the bloggers started going to fashion shows, right? You're always going to have people complaining about this idea that the riffraff is being let into these hallowed halls. But our society changes, and it's changing faster and faster, especially in the age of the internet, and fashion marketing has to keep up with that. Because I haven't been to other fashion weeks, I do think it's very interesting to think about other trade shows or conventions that you may have attended for industries that you do have access to. We're going to talk about that, but before we get there, I want to talk about the sponsor for this video, Skillshare. I started taking Skillshare classes in the last year, particularly because I have been transitioning from a career in audio production, I was a podcast producer, into what I'm doing now, which is social media and other sort of social media related freelancing jobs. Changing careers is obviously very challenging, and so it's nice to have Skillshare to take classes, especially because they have so many creative classes for hobbyists or people like me who are trying to do it full time. This week I'm taking a color grading class because, as I just said, I come from an audio background. So video, I still have rough spots that I'm trying to iron out. These classes are super helpful, especially because they go through color grading in DaVinci Resolve, which is what I use to edit my YouTube videos and short form sometimes. After you take these lessons, they do give you a bit of homework to sort of test out your skills. So I've been color grading some clips, which they gave me. So hopefully it'll make my videos a little bit more enticing, a little bit more professional. I do personally like a very relatable look, is what I would call it. So I'm probably not going to change things too much. I'm not going for cinematic, but I definitely think things can be improved. After I'm done mastering color grading, there are so many more amazing creative classes to take on Skillshare. And if you guys are interested in trying it out, the first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. And now we can get back to the topic at hand. So when I first entered the workforce, my first salary job was at Marvel, which I've mentioned before, and I used to go to comic conventions. And I would say the differences and similarities between a fashion week and a comic book convention are actually maybe not as far apart as you would think. It's just that interest in comic books is much smaller than interest in fashion, right? A lot more. I mean, everyone wears clothes, right? You just have a much bigger audience when you're talking about fashion as opposed to comic books. But at conventions, we would have the same thing. Like, I would go to after parties. I would go to special little events where it was more industry insiders and you would network with people. I would meet writers and colorists. And those writers and colorists were there. Like they would come to Marvel parties to network with the editors, to network with not me as much as a podcast producer, but I was there and I would talk to people and be like, oh, you should come on our podcast. Like, let's get in touch. And it really was, it's industry, it's your job. For me, that was always the best part of my job. That was my favorite thing, was to work comic book conventions, putting together live events. I really enjoyed just like the social aspect of it, to work in person, to work with people, not be so much, computer focused. So for me, actually, this is a personal thing, obviously, but for me, actually, to be able to attend industry events is it's a huge bonus. And it really, I think, brings the work alive for me. The other industry events I've had exposure to is actually furniture. My mom has a furniture showroom in Philadelphia, and she would come to New York fairly often to go. They like have their own kind of like furniture weeks, right? And I would go with her in Soho, and we would just like hop from showroom to showroom, and they all had, free little glasses of wine, and she would talk to all these Italian guys, and she knew all the designers, and she would fangirl, to see someone that she knew. She's like, oh, this guy makes this, and this guy works for this company. And for her, this was super exciting, and she was getting to meet people. She was making good contacts. She wanted to carry, this furniture brand in her store. And yeah, you just don't have as many people wanting to like get into furniture events. I think partially Fashion Week, again, because there are more, I'm sure that there are influencers for furniture and interior design, and in some ways probably comic books in the same way there's book talk, but it's not as celebrity focused, I think, and fashion influencers, lifestyle fashion influencers, it's a very big industry within itself. And so I think in some ways, the people who are more attracted to Fashion Week events, it feels like it has a lower barrier to entry, right? Because anyone can like throw in a good fit, right? And want to show that off and want to talk to other people that they feel like they have community with because they're interested in clothes, even if you don't necessarily like work in the industry. Whereas if you were just like going to a furniture party, there's not like an outward way to communicate that you're into furniture. And if you're not in the industry, what would you even talk to those people about necessarily? And yeah, so I think that's what makes people want to go to Fashion Week events more specifically than break in or, try to get invites to any other sort of trade shows or industry events. And that's not to say, however, that there weren't people who were, there were people who trying to get into the Marvel parties. Either they wanted to become comic book writers or artists, or they were just kind of like fanboys of the artists that were present. So there's always, people who want to get into these spaces no matter what industry you're in. I think that's very natural. So I guess that's what I'm saying is like all these critiques and complaints about New York Fashion Week that are like, it's exclusionary. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the point. Like fashion is selling you an idea of something that's like for a special group of people, like a group of people that you want to belong to. So you buy clothes so you feel like you might be able to belong to that group of people. Like that's by design. But it's also exclusionary because I went to a couple parties. They're not that hard to get into. A lot of them weren't like crazy packed or anything, but it's all people who know each other and who, sorry, there's, I think, an ambulance going by. So I was going to parties also that, you can bring a +1, you can bring a friend. There are people who are in the greater menswear scene all year round who go to these parties. And so they also get to go to these Fashion Week parties, even if they aren't necessarily in the industry. They're hobbyists. They know people who are there, they've like been around these circles before. And so there is a just general, genuine social connection. But for me also, like, I understand the FOMO struggle of it. I really, really do. For me, I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Actually, I'm making a video for my Patreon, a little bit more dishy, a little bit more behind the scenes about exactly what events I went to, what I was wearing, what people there were wearing, what the vibe was, what I learned, who I met, that kind of stuff. I'm going to put that all in a video for my Patreon supporters. So if you're interested in that, I'll put my Patreon information in the description below. But I just want to say, like, I genuinely was networking. And I feel like I've seen a couple of videos that are like, don't have FOMO, like, it's not that cool, you don't meet that many people, like, everyone, it's packed and everyone's a wannabe or whatever. maybe it was just the events that I was going to, but I legitimately did meet people that I think will help me in my career, especially right now while I'm changing careers. It's really important for me to meet people. And I think partially that's because I have been networking and socializing within a crowd that I formed good connections with all year round. So I didn't just start at New York Fashion Week. I knew people that I'd been building relationships, and then they brought me to a couple of things. And then I made more connections from a strong foundation, if that makes sense. But would I be doing this if I wasn't in the industry? Like, would I want to go to those parties? I have friends who definitely do this. Like, they try to go to Fashion Week parties, and they have in the past, and they have a good time because like you can get a few drinks. You're just like at a bar. That's a good time. But I don't think they're actually necessarily there to network. They're just trying to like be in the mix, which is fun. I don't think there's necessarily, again, anything wrong with that either. With the people who are just trying to get into the parties. Yeah, who doesn't want to go to a party? I don't know. Anyway, that's why I think all of this discussion to me is like pretty unserious, or just, it's not explosive. We're not blowing this case wide open. It is an industry event. Influencers are part of the industry. They are part of the marketing machine of the industry. And yeah, for me personally, it is worth it at this point in time to go to these events and meet people. So what are the conversations online about New York Fashion Week that I think are worth taking into consideration? There are a couple of writers, influencers, people have podcasts, Instagrams, they are writing on Threads, they're writing on Substack. There's a whole bunch of people I would suggest looking into. I do feel like sometimes I struggle to like cultivate a fashion information diet. And so if you guys have any suggestions, I would love to hear about them. But these are the people that I've been tuning into in the past week or two. The first place to start, I think, would be Business of Fashion, BOF. They have a podcast, and they recently came out with an episode that was like the Great Fashion Reset. And it does a great job of giving us a sort of overview of where fashion is as an industry. And the first thing to know, again, because New York Fashion Week is an industry phenomenon, the way it all plays out is obviously affected by where the industry is at in an economic sense. And of course, you've seen a lot of videos of content about the like designer, creative director, musical chairs. So all these different designers are making their debuts at specific houses or brands. And so we're at this sort of fluctuation point in fashion because the industry is struggling and lots of things are changing to sort of adapt or react to that. And everyone is, I would say, waiting with bated breath to see what will happen next. But I really did like this BOF podcast episode. Essentially, the long and short of it is that fashion sales have been down. Luxury brands are really suffering. So prices are very high. People are not happy with the quality. You may have seen that drama around Wisdom K getting a couple of Miu Miu products like that he bought with his own money that broke immediately when he got home. It was such a perfect example of why faith has been lost in luxury, is you're paying high prices and you're not necessarily getting good quality. There's also obviously generalized, more wider economic reasons of just like post-pandemic, there was a little bit of an uptick in buying, and then our economic situation has been much more inconsistent, especially with Trump and the tariffs. It just feels like the fashion industry is on unstable ground. There's a lot of thinking to do about how brands need to be presenting themselves, how they need to be pricing their products. And I thought the BOF podcast did a really good job talking about marketing, specifically changes in marketing, and how these brands need to let go of old image-based Vogue two-page Vogue ads. Like, these things don't necessarily work anymore. The fashion houses are competing for attention with every other interest that people have because everything's online, everything's social media. So you're scrolling through your page. Sure, you're going to see a Dior ad or pictures or something from a runway show. And then you're going to see the sports game. And then you're going to see a cute dog. And then you're going to see a beauty campaign, whatever. Like, you don't have this siloed piece of media that you sort of sit down and just devote your like fashion attention to. So it's a much harder market, and there are certainly ways to be effective and to adapt, but not all the brands have figured it out. The other piece I really appreciated was Rachel Tastian's opinion piece for Washington Post called "When Did New York Fashion Week Get So Boring?" The subtitle is, "There's too much good taste at New York Fashion Week. The lineup has felt like watching the same movie over and over again." Personally, I only went to one runway show, so I'm sure she went to a bunch. And even if you don't, obviously you can go online and see the pictures, especially if you pay for Vogue, which I do now because I can write it off as a business expense. And her take, which I understand, I think, why it's happening, because of the lack of confidence in the fashion industry right now. People are calling it like going more conservative. They're going conservative, but not like in a right political sense necessarily, but conservative in just in a safe way. And she names a bunch of brands: Calvin Klein, F-Form, Ashland, Tibby. Of course, Tibby's sort of always been there, but Totem, Parenza Schouler. I'm not sure about that. Altazara. All these brands seem to be catering to the same sort of idea of a wealthy woman between the ages of 30 to 50 who wants to spend money on nice, beautiful clothing that she can wear to work and about town. And it's sort of, it's just the same audience, right? It's all these brands going to the same customer and begging for their attention because they think that customer has money and will buy. She asks an interesting question, which is, at that point, do these even merit a fashion show? Can you not just do a presentation or a lookbook and show the clothes that way? Because, there's two ways I think to think about this. When you're looking at fashion, or a runway show, you can look at it one way, which is as a shopper. What would you want to buy? What do you want to wear? Do you like that collection? Because you're going to go to the store and get it. Obviously, depending on the show, very few people can actually go out and buy these clothes because they're expensive. On the other hand, you can think of these things more as an industry critic would, which I've been trying to formulate my brain more in this sense, which it does, honestly, you need to like research the shows a little bit more and put more effort into understanding them to come through with this sort of critique, which is why I, and I'm sure other people don't do it as much, is this serving an audience? Is the designer's vision cohesive, and are they communicating that vision well? Will this sell? Like, not only are you serving an audience, if a bunch of other people, like Rachel is talking about, are serving the same audience, why are your clothes going to serve that audience best? How are you going to stand out among the crowd if you're all going towards this, professional woman in urban centers who are supposedly going to buy these clothes? I think those are also, we are not necessarily always going to know until, we see how things are priced and how they sell. But if you're looking specifically at the collections that come out of New York Fashion Week and see that it seems like most of these shows are targeted towards one type of consumer and a supposedly safe consumer, you're thinking, well, what about everyone else? What about a more alternative vision? What about a more artistic expression of fashion? Because, fashion is at this conjunction of art and utility. And it seems like we're seeing a lot of utility and a little less art this New York Fashion Week. Again, I'm not going to sit here and necessarily plagiarize this work. I just want to point you towards people and resources that I think have a little bit more interesting things to say about New York Fashion Week. And the other people I want to briefly mention are Ryan Finn, of course. Every time I follow her on every platform, she explores a little bit more of the theoretical underpinnings behind fashion shows or products. So talking more about like, why was this created? What's the idea behind this? Like, what's the commentary, which is also super interesting to me personally. I also listen to Brenda #'s podcast. She is an influencer, but she's very personally focused on the industry, on the business side, and she does these Fashion Week intermissions, which I like because even before I ever, had a Fashion Week as even a twinkle in my eye, she gave a very interesting look of how people get invited to these things, the money that's involved, what it's like, what a schedule looks like to really attend a fashion week. She gets into like the nitty-gritty details that I feel like not a lot of people talk about. To me, that's very interesting because, you know, I come from a production background, so I kind of like to know like how it all works together and how these schedules are formed and how people make money or spend money. She actually, if you listen to her episode, I think the most interesting thing about it was her comments on the brand Kate, which again focused on this very specific type of professional woman with money and a career, probably consumer, like missing the mark on their show. And again, I just think it's very interesting to think about what good fashion marketing is and how brands make decisions around, again, who to invite to these events, how to put events on, what to show at the events, and whether or not that is good branding. Branding is insanely difficult. I totally legitimately understand that. I think she has a really good eye for it, especially because she's branded herself, I think personally so well. I think the most impressive thing about Brenda Hashtag is how well she was able to brand herself. And so anyway, I think she's a good person to listen to specifically about branding. And then finally, I'm trying to get a little bit more into Jaleel Johnson's Substack. I'm just not really a Substack person necessarily, but there are a lot of good fashion writers on Substack. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience at Fashion Week, my thoughts on it as like an industry event, and people I think who are saying good and interesting things about it. Again, if you're looking for a little bit more of a behind the scenes look at what I did this Fashion Week, I did go to mostly menswear events just because that's who I know. So I'm running with a group of eligible bachelors, and you can see them all in 4K on my Patreon. Thank you guys so much. Is it so obvious that I'm tired? I've been socializing for so long, which I love to socialize. Invite me to your things.